Awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. And thanks everyone for having me here today. You'll have to bear with me just a tiny bit. My snotty children have given me a cold, so that's why I'm not there in person. But if I need to cough or have a drink of water, please forgive me. And I'll try not to sound too croaky as I go through. So I know that some of you might be more familiar with the work of the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, or AWC. Some of you will be more familiar than others. So first I'll do a bit of a background on our organisation and what we do, and then I'll get more into an update on some of our recent projects that you might be interested in learning about. So I'm sure we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I know Kate's going to be monitoring the chat because I can't actually see it while I'm presenting, so she'll keep an eye on that. And if you want to jump in with questions, feel free. Otherwise, we'll have plenty of time at the end. All right, so before I get started, I would just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. The Aboriginal people have been caretakers of this country for many thousands of years, and we have much to learn from each other. And at AWC, we really do value working closely with a number of traditional owners, groups and Aboriginal people on a lot of our sanctuaries. And the picture in the background of this slide was actually painted by Alice, who's a ranger at our New Haven Wildlife Sanctuary, which I'll talk a bit more about later. So to start at the very beginning, the Australian Wildlife Conservancy was founded by a committed conservationist called Martin Copley. In the early 1990s, Martin established Calimyrna, which was our very first sanctuary, protecting 268 hectares in the Perth Hills. Martin had a vision for a new model of really practical hands-on conservation, and he wanted to lead the way in reversing Australia's extinction crisis. And it is a crisis. So I'm sure I don't have to tell you, but Australia is one of the most biodiverse countries on the planet, and our wildlife is really unique. For example, the incredible numbat here represents around 40 million years of evolution. There is nothing else quite like our numbats anywhere in the world. But our unique native wildlife is in serious trouble. So species like the numbat, once common, are now critically endangered, and there are only a few thousand individuals remaining. Many more of our species are teetering on the brink of extinction. The rate of our animal extinctions has been constant and is rising. So this graph shows the number of threatened species listed in our national legislation over time. It could probably do with an update, but the trajectory would remain the same. It shows more extinctions are inevitable, and something has to be done to reverse the trend. And so that's where AWC comes in. AWC protects endangered wildlife across 12.9 million hectares. So we are the largest non-government holder of conservation land in Australia and one of the largest in the world. So we've got a dedicated team of ecologists, scientists and land managers looking after those 12.9 million hectares. 70% of our staff are based in the field, and we are funded predominantly by private donations. AWC has a number of strategic partnerships as well to ensure more areas can be protected and managed for the benefit of our native wildlife. So some of those properties that you can see on the map are owned by AWC. Others are managed in partnership with traditional owners, government or private landholders. But what all these properties have in common is they have AWC staff on the ground carrying out vital research, land management and conservation work. So I thought we could just take a brief look at some of these incredible places, such as the property Josh and I were talking about earlier on. So we'll start in Queensland, and this is Mount Zero Taravale, nearly 60,000 hectares located around 80 kilometres northwest of Townsville. So 73 distinct ecosystems have been mapped on this property, ranging from rainforest and tall wet sclerophyll forests right through to open eucalypt woodlands and shrublands. It's a really special landscape at Mount Zero Taravale, and it's home to the shaman's rock wallaby, which we have around 80% of the remaining population of this species finding refuge here. The property is also home to one of the highest densities in Queensland of the endangered greater gliders. I love these guys. They look like fluffy little teddy bears. If we go into New South Wales now, and Scotia Wildlife Sanctuary is one of the most important nature reserves in the Murray-Darling Basin. It contains a really large fenced area, and I'll talk a bit more about our fences later, but this one's home to some of the largest remaining populations of threatened mammals. So AWC has re-established wild, self-sustaining populations of 5 nationally threatened mammals here. So we've got the numbat, the bridled nail-tail wallaby, the brush-tailed bettong and the burrowing bettong, as well as some gorgeous bilbies. So for these animals, our work at Scotia is vital to safeguarding them from extinction. Across into South Australia now, and this is the majestic Calimyrna Sanctuary, 697,000 hectares on the edge of the Simpson Desert and the largest private reserve in the country. So the acquisition of Calimyrna linked the Caritunda Lake Eyre National Park and the Mungatiri Simpson Desert Reserves, creating a contiguous protected area larger than Tasmania. So here we've created a stronghold for several threatened and declining species, including the crest-tailed mulgara. Now, you might have heard of this one before, but if you haven't, he's a small carnivorous marsupial who lives in burrows among the sand dunes and emerges at night to hunt. And he sounds ferocious, but he looks really cute. The annual bird surveys here at Calimyrna Sanctuary have recorded more than 167 bird species. And one of my favourite stories, the iconic Aryan grass wren was also rediscovered on Calimyrna in 2021 after it hadn't been seen for more than 50 years. So it's just a great story about how we should never lose hope. And he's a cutie too. Almost right in the middle of Australia, and this is Newhaven Wildlife Sanctuary, 261,000 hectares, and it's located northwest of Alice Springs, so it's really hot. You might have seen this place in the news a bit recently. So Newhaven is the site of a globally significant rewilding program, bringing locally extinct native mammals back to the region. A massive fenced area of 9,500 hectares has been built here to protect the native animals from feral predators. Reintroductions here started in 2017. And since then, marla, red-tailed phascogales, woylies or brush-tailed bettongs, bilbies, and burrowing bettongs have been reintroduced and are thriving in their natural habitat inside the fence. The central rock rat is the newest Newhaven resident, placing AWC almost halfway to completing this ambitious reintroduction program. So this is the bit you might have seen on the ABC News a few weeks ago. And this translocation was a massive project, and there were many years of preparation before we got to this point. But the actual translocation was a great success, thank goodness, because it was a huge amount of work. So the first step was collecting some central rock rats from the remnant populations in the West McDonnell Ranges. So there's only 4 small subpopulations of these animals remaining. And you probably know, but they've been listed as one of the mammals most likely to go extinct in the next few years. So we knew we had to act fairly quickly. So over 5 days, small aluminium box traps were set at dusk, baited with an irresistible combination of peanut butter and oats, which completely coincidentally happens to be the main ingredients in the bliss balls I always keep in my fridge. So good for the rats, good for me. The 74 captured rock rats were carefully transported via helicopter to Ormiston Gorge Ranger Station, where DNA samples were collected and they were given a health check, make sure they were all healthy specimens. 58 of those rock rats then jumped back into the helicopter and were transferred directly to the top of the Wardakinpiri Range, which is a 10-kilometre long quartzite outcrop, which is ideal habitat for these rock rats. And that area is within the fence at Newhaven. So at dusk, they were released into their new home, where the greatest threat to their survival, which is feral cats, has been completely removed. So they should be really happy in there. 16 remaining animals were then taken to Alice Springs Desert Park, where they will become founders of a new captive breeding program that hopes to boost numbers for subsequent releases. So that's very good news for the central rock rats, and hopefully we will now be able to prevent that species from going extinct. And our plan is to ultimately see 11 locally extinct species restored to their former range at Newhaven. So that's 6 done and 5 to go. As we were talking about briefly at the start, AWC also has a huge presence in the Kimberley. And the Mornington Marion Downs Sanctuary is a model for conservation in Northern Australia, protecting 564,000 hectares in the iconic Kimberley region. Aside from containing some of Australia's most spectacular scenery, this sanctuary protects a high diversity of wildlife, including critically important populations of threatened species such as the Gouldian finch, the purple-crowned fairy wren, and my personal favourite, the northern quoll. They've got attitude, those guys. And that's the end of our whirlwind tour. There's plenty more properties on the map, but we won't look at them all in detail. And we've selected all of those wonderful properties really carefully. And we choose areas of conservation significance where our work can have the greatest impact at scale. So scale is really important to us. We make sure that the properties that we're working on are large enough to make a real difference in the area. AWC's mission is the effective conservation of all Australian animal species and the habitats in which they live. So on those sanctuaries that you've just seen and others across Australia, AWC protects more native Australian animal species than any other non-government organisation. We protect 88% of Australia's birds, 74% of our mammals, and more than 50% of our frogs and reptiles. But our goal is to close the gap and have 100% of Australian species present on one or more AWC sanctuaries. And that way we can ensure these animals are effectively conserved and safeguarded for future generations. So what does this effective conservation look like exactly? So we all know that it's not enough to simply acquire the land. You have to do something with it. So AWC undertakes practical land management. So we focus on fire management, feral animal control, and weed eradication. And all of our work is informed by world-class science. Our focus on getting boots on the ground does set us apart. So 70% of our team are out there on the land, making a practical, measurable difference. And we'll look just a little bit more closely now at the conservation work that our team does in the field every day. Firstly, fire. So getting fire management right is crucial to managing Australia's landscapes. AWC undertakes the largest non-government fire management program in Australia across more than 8 million hectares. Most of you are probably well aware of the benefits of fire management, but for those of you who aren't, good fire management involves a regular schedule of cooler, patchy burns, creating that mosaic of burnt and unburnt vegetation. And that ensures sufficient habitat and food remains for the native wildlife. And it also encourages the growth of native plants over weeds, reduces the fuel load, and can help prevent those destructive hot wildfires that can take hold when the land isn't managed correctly. We could probably have an entire presentation on fire management alone, but I will stop there. If you'd like any more information, please let me know. And I'm also always interested in hearing different perspectives on fire management because people often have some really interesting insights to add. So let me know. Feral animal control is another really important way that AWC protects our native wildlife on our sanctuaries. Feral herbivores like buffalo, goats, pigs, feral cattle, they all degrade the landscape and they destroy habitat for the native wildlife. Their hard hooves are particularly destructive around waterways. AWC undertakes the largest feral animal control program in Australia. Each year we remove thousands of feral herbivores from our sanctuaries. So getting fire management right and removing feral herbivores is critical to improving ecological health across those vast landscapes that we manage. But while feral herbivores are bad for our native wildlife, feral cats are much worse. So feral cats are still the single greatest threat to Australia's wildlife. Recent research confirmed that feral cats kill 1.5 billion animals every year. And that's not including insects and frogs. Pet cats kill another 500 million animals, even though their owners probably would never believe it. That's over 5 million animals every single night killed by cats. So AWC is leading the charge in understanding and dealing with feral cats. We've done our own scientific research to better understand and track the movement of feral cats in the Australian landscape. So we now know that effective fire management helps reduce the hunting success of feral cats. And elsewhere, we're establishing a network of large cat-free areas. We're restoring locally extinct species into these fenced areas where the cats cannot get them. And that is our best solution until a longer term solution can be found for feral cats. AWC manages more cat and fox-free land than any other organisation on mainland Australia. So on this map, the green spots are existing feral-proof fenced areas, the yellow spots are under construction, and the blue, which is Foray Island, is a feral-free island sanctuary. So once we've established the fence, AWC undertakes extensive feral animal eradication and monitoring. And once that area is declared feral-free, we are able to safely reintroduce regionally extinct and threatened species. They won't get gobbled up. So we do this by undertaking Australia's most extensive threatened species translocation program. So just like those central rock rats, over 6.5 thousand animals from over 20 species have been translocated into, out of and between AWC sanctuaries and partnership sites to date. And that's a record in Australia. So we know that these fence safe havens and our translocation program are critical to securing the future of Australia's most threatened wildlife. As researchers and scientists yourselves, I'm sure you'll be glad to know that science does underpin everything we do. Results are tracked and reported through an extensive annual ecological survey program to create comprehensive inventory of all the species we protect on each sanctuary and the steps we're taking to protect and conserve their habitats. So that's a lot of trap nights every year that our ecologists and scientists conduct. AWC also partners with universities and scientific institutions such as yourselves to conduct important research, and we publish our findings. We're also working on a climate change adaptation strategy, and that will inform future conservation work. Now I'm nearly at the end, but before I finish up, I will give you an update on two of our special projects that AWC is working on here in Queensland. So first we'll go back to Mount Zero Taravale, which is up near Townsville. And here we're in the middle of a project to rescue Australia's rarest bettong from extinction. And normally when I talk to groups about this project, they don't know about the bettongs, but I'm sure most of you know what a bettong is. This is the northern bettong. He's a pocket-sized relative of the kangaroos. He's about 1 kilogram in weight, just over 30 centimetres long with a tail that long again. He's a photogenic little marsupial and he has selective taste, eating mostly underground fungi or truffles. He is regarded as a keystone species responsible for the dispersal of fungi across the forest floor. And these fungi play an essential role in forest health. Removing these bettongs from the environment makes a massive difference to the ecosystem. Northern bettongs were once common across Queensland, from the wet tropics right through to central Queensland, including on Mount Zero Taravale. But predation by feral cats, wildfires and habitat loss since European settlement means that this species is now restricted to a very limited area. It's estimated that fewer than 1,000 remain across only 2 locations. So the northern bettong is at great risk of extinction and the future of the species hangs in the balance. I just love that little tail swish he does at the end there. So to protect the species, AWC is returning the northern bettong to Mount Zero Taravale. We are building a large fenced feral predator-free area on Mount Zero Taravale that encompasses a range of the forest types previously utilised by the northern bettong. A reintroduction program will commence in 2023, translocating up to 60 northern bettongs from the remnant populations to this fence safe haven. And when a secure, genetically viable population of around 500 individuals has been established, they'll then become an important source for further translocations and reintroductions. So hopefully we can build up the numbers that way. It's a really long process to carry out the species translocation, and even more so when the species is so critically endangered. So far in this program, we have identified the reintroduction site on Mount Zero Taravale. We have consulted and collaborated with the Northern Bettong Recovery Team and worked very closely with traditional owners. We've written a translocation proposal, which has been signed by the Queensland Government, and that's a stack of paperwork. we've obtained vegetation clearing permits and undertaken a cultural heritage assessment so that we can put the fence in. We really wanted to make sure our fence line wasn't going to cause more problems than it solved. So we had to do a lot of consultation before we knew exactly where the fence was going to go. We've conducted ongoing source site monitoring. So the two remnant populations of northern bettongs are in the Lamb Range and Mount Spurgeon near Cairns. So we've been watching those remnant populations for a long time to make sure that they are healthy enough and their numbers don't drop too low so that we can actually take some animals from there. We've developed a disease risk assessment and we've sourced significant funding because a project like this does not come cheap. So the next step is to complete construction of the fence. With nearly 30 creek crossings, this is no easy feat. But the fence is essential because we need to protect the bettongs from feral predators, protect their habitat, especially from feral pigs who smush their habitat and also eat all their truffles. And we also want to be able to enable ongoing monitoring while that population is becoming established. So we need to keep them relatively contained, if you can call 950 hectares contained. So there's no doubt that this is an ambitious project, but it will be incredible to see these important native mammals back in what used to be their home. And as of this month, fence construction has commenced. So our social media just announced this today as well. So if you jump on LinkedIn, you can see some better pictures than this one of the fence and the clearing that we've had to do around the fence area, and a bit more of the fence in the ground than that #1 pole right there. It's solid. Can tell. In another exciting project for Queensland, the Queensland government has called on AWC to help protect the northern hairy-nosed wombat from extinction. I'm sure you know, but there are 3 types of wombat in Australia: the common wombat, the southern hairy-nosed wombat, and the northern hairy-nosed wombat. So the northern hairy-nosed wombat once had a broad range across 3 states, but it is now critically endangered. Only around 300 animals now survive, and it's considered one of the rarest mammals in the world. So these 300 wombats are restricted to only 2 sites in Queensland. Around 18 are at the Richard Underwood Nature Refuge near St George, and the remaining population is at Epping Forest National Park under the watchful care of Alan Horsup. The Queensland Government Department of Environment and Science has called on AWC to manage Richard Underwood Nature Refuge and to establish a 3rd site in a suitable location where a 3rd population of wombats can be established. So over the next few years, we will be working with DES to boost wombat populations and secure that species. So it really is such an exciting time to be involved with AWC as we scale up our work around Australia. Our work's made possible because of our wonderful staff, our volunteers and our supporters, both those who donate financially and those who spread the word about what we do. So if you would like to help protect Australia's wildlife, you can support AWC in a couple of ways. You can subscribe to our e-newsletter. So just jump on the website, there's a little box, drop your email address in there, and you can learn a bit more about what we do and spread the word to your family and friends. As I mentioned, we spend most of our money on our in-the-field work, so we don't have a huge marketing budget. So anything that you can do to spread the word for us is really helpful. You can also sign up to volunteer on our website and assist our dedicated team in the field. So if you want to intern with us at some stage or partner with us for any research projects, volunteering is a really great first step, and it's a good way to meet the team as well. So you can do all that online. There's a section called volunteer, I think it's called, and you just go in and put in some details. It'll take a few minutes to put in all the details that we ask for, but once we've got your profile, we can match you to volunteering opportunities as they arise. And of course, the third thing is you can donate, either monthly or a one-off contribution to help fund our ongoing conservation work on the ground. Any support means the world to us. Something I like to do is tell my family and friends that I don't want birthday or Christmas presents, I just want a donation, and that's a good way to do it if you're a bit financially stretched yourself. So that's about it from me. Thank you so much for listening. I've just kind of been talking the whole time and I haven't had any interruptions, so I'm looking forward to answering some questions. My contact details are on the screen as well, so please take note of those and let me know if you have any questions that we don't get to today. I'm always happy to have a chat.